Hi, Jose.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi,
Hi,
Jose.
Steve.
I'm glad Jake said that because I did not see you. I don't know why. So I think, let's see, who else are you waiting for, Jake?
I think for this meeting, we're all set
Okay,
on our
so
end.
Curtis will be a little bit late. So if everyone's amenable, we can get started. And if someone could just, in your mind, if you see Curtis, just like write down the time. If I haven't done it, I would appreciate it. Okay, so I would like to call the Mount Greylock Regional School District School Committee to order. This is the public hearing and school committee meeting. It's Thursday, March 14th, 2024, 6 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom. This meeting will be broadcast live on WillieNet TV channel 1302 in Williamstown and available on both willienet.org and the Mount Greylock Regional School District YouTube channel within 24 hours of the meeting. If we could please call the roll alphabetically by last name.
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine here.
Curtis, he'll be joining us later.
Green here.
Malloy here.
Miller here.
Thank you. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through high expectation and cooperation, resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. The first item on our agenda was a student update, but we will not be having the student update tonight because there is a mandatory athletic meeting for students and parents tonight. So we will move into the Mount Greylock Regional School District FY25 public hearing budget presentation.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Christina. Joe, do you want to start? Do you want me to start? Do you want me to do the slides, or do you want to control the slides?
Why don't you start and I'll do the
Awesome.
slides? How about that?
Thank you. And we do apologize to those of you who were torn between being here or being with your student athlete over at spring athletics meetings tonight. So we apologize maybe, or maybe we say you're welcome because you would rather be here than there. So maybe we should apologize to other members of your family, but thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for everybody that's joining us online or will be watching us on WillieNet or YouTube. This year, thank you to the wisdom of Joe Bergeron, we started internal budget conversations extremely early this year, really starting to get substantive around mid-September to beginning of October. Internally with our team and among our central office and among our administrative team, because we could see really with sort of the two-fisted budgetary challenges that were going to be going on, which include inflation on one hand and federal COVID monies drawing to a quick end on the other hand, that there was the potential for this to be a challenging year. When we pair that up with some of the challenges that our communities are facing, which, like many challenges, are not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing, but it does create a challenge for folks like our finance committees and the boards and the individuals that set tax rates. That what people are paying for their property taxes, thanks to increasing home values, which is a good thing on one hand, but it certainly does increase the amount of money that you have to pay merely to stay in your home and enjoy the quality of the community of where your home resides. So we do understand that this is a challenging year this year. And Joe, if you just back up one slide, I'll go through those bullets. So tonight, we're just going to lay out our vision for this year's budget. We're going to talk about our challenges a little bit. We're going to put our spending for the Mount Greylock Regional School District into the context of the greater region and in fact, do some comparisons from across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Joe will be providing a budget summary just to really go through all of the hundreds of pieces that comprise that bottom line that we take into our town meetings. We will be examining our financial position relative to excess and deficiency, to school choice, and to tuition funds. And then we will be having a conversation with the school committee and having a vote to accept a bottom line number so that we can begin to prepare to go into our finance committees in Lanesboro and in Williamstown and continue having substantial conversations with them. And so before we jump in, we certainly all owe a debt of gratitude, probably several hundred debts to Joe for his keeping a finger on the pulse of our budget in the statewide context and in the local context for 365 days a year at a time. And we're very grateful to those of you on the school committee that keep an eye on what's happening around the state, that keep an eye on what's happening in our two towns. Thankful to Carrie for staying so in touch with state powers through the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to keep informed of what's happening. And we're really grateful to not only the folks out in our towns that actually write checks for their tax bills or go online and pay their tax bills every year, which is what allows us in a district like Mount Greylock to do virtually everything that we do. But thank you to our town administrators, our select boards, our finance committees, in the town finance offices that we work with closely year round to make sure that we are delivering the best product that we can deliver to our students and to our families, but also to the towns that we're here to serve. And with that, we'll move into a little bit of our vision for the budget. The way that we approach this is year 4 of you seeing some variation of this from Joe and I. We provide for our students the things that we're required by law to provide. That's really our foundational level of what is a public school obligated to provide to the people for which it exists. And so we do provide to our students what we are required by law to provide. And that's not the same thing for each and every one of our individual students. It can vary based on student need, but we certainly do provide what we are legally obligated to provide. We have the privilege and the luxury in these communities to provide the services, the people, the staffing, the experiences, and the places that our students, our families, and the community members that we're here to serve not only deserve and expect, but much of what they want for their children, which is why they chose to purchase a home in Lanesboro, why they chose to make a home in Williamstown. And we listen to those folks, and we understand it's important that we provide what we're legally obligated to provide, but we're also sensitive to what our community wants and needs and deserves. And then finally, there are some things that maybe don't fit into either of those previous two categories. Those are the things that we know as educators, that we believe as educators, some of us with several decades under our belt of being public school educators. These are the things that we know we have to provide simply because we are decent, caring human beings that care about, care for, and know that burden, which is not a burden at all, but really a pleasure and an honor of care that we owe our communities. And I am just going to show that Curtis jumped on at 6:10. You will pardon that brief interruption and welcome Curtis. And so this is how we go about budgeting. What do we have to do? What do we do because our community deserves it? And then what do we do because we know it is the right thing to do? We can move on to the next slide, Joe. Serving our students, our families, and our communities. We work to be responsive to the needs of our complex and changing society. There's almost not a day that goes by. I found myself today speaking with a couple of educators at Lanesboro at the end of the day. I actually used the phrase kids these days. And one of my colleagues was a teacher and a paraprofessional. Both of them almost stepped on one another to call me out on really, Jake, really, you're using that phrase. No, we were talking about digital cameras as opposed to film cameras, but there's almost not a day that goes by where we are not, our principals are not, our classroom teachers, our paraprofessionals, where we are not dealing with the realities of not only the tiny bits of real estate that we occupy in Lanesboro and Williamstown, but society writ large in a national community and in a global community. And we need to be responsive to that. We work to be responsive to the needs of these two very special, unique communities that comprise the district, as well to the communities around us that we also serve, like New Ashford and Hancock, and the communities that we serve through school choice, the communities in Vermont that we serve through tuition work, and the communities that we work with, the educational communities particularly, like the North Adams Public Schools and McCann, and our colleagues at the Bart Charter Public School and at Hoosick Valley and in Pittsfield. We really take seriously that we are public servants that serve very special communities. We work to be responsive to the varying individual needs of our students and meet them where they are in terms of their academics, in terms of where they are socially, in terms of where they are emotionally, in terms of where they are developmentally. And not only do we work to meet them exactly where they are, but we help them and to work with their families, with their parents, with their guardians, with their caretakers to start really building aspirations. And we're meeting them where they are in order that we can help them achieve those places where they want to be, that their trajectory for their time with us is appropriate to where, who, and what they want to be doing when they're 25 and 35 and 45 and 55. And we work to do all of this work in efficient ways and in cost-effective ways, because we do realize that the resources that we have are not limitless. This is one of those years where we are particularly reminded of that. We're really not flush with money from the federal government in response to COVID this year. We are hearing our communities when they say, you have our full support, but in order to support everything else that we need to support in order to be the most livable, just communities that we can be, we have to fund and provide resources to a number of programs and a number of people that serve our community with a capital C. And we understand that the needs and the wants of our communities are growing just as our needs and our wants and our responsiveness as a regional school district continue to grow. So our enrollment figures, as we've seen, even going back to October and November when we were talking about enrollments, our enrollment figures continue to be above our own expectations and certainly well above the expectations set by the Berkshire County Regional Planning Commission. And we're grateful for their work. And we continue to use their 2020 report as a benchmark for where we should be, where we want to be, and really pushing where we aspire to be. And this year, in particular, and sadly, because of the budget constraints that some of our neighboring districts are facing, we have a fairly massive list of school choice applications as we sit here in mid-March. It's we always have a sizable list of applications, but it's very clear to me, based on simply the size, and it grows every day, literally, that some of our neighbors are having to face really, really significant challenges and make brutally difficult choices, which are causing some of the people they serve to perhaps look elsewhere. Our numbers of very specialized, very nuanced needs continues to increase. That's no surprise. Our professional development and our staffing needs continue and must continue to evolve to meet the diverse needs and wants of our student population and the expectations of our family. And when we're talking about staffing and some of our professional development, some of it goes beyond the needs and the wants to that foundational piece of our budget approach, which is the law requires it, in terms of serving students with special needs on individualized education plans, in terms of serving students who are multilingual learners and learning English as they learn 7 or 8 pieces of subject matter. And then some of those very specialized needs, and this is a real driver in our budget this year, as you will hear when Joe gets into some of the more nitty-gritty. Some of these very, very specialized, very fine focus needs are needs that cannot be served within the boundaries of our own 2 communities. And even if we were able to serve those students hypothetically, I'm not sure that we could hire the staff with the expertise who would best serve those students or do so in a cost-effective manner. And so we pay for those students to go outside of our district to be educated. Many costs that we are facing and many of our increases are coming in at a higher rate than our towns can really afford, given the 360 degrees of community care that the towns are responsible for providing. Because just as everything is going up in cost for us, everything is also going up in cost for senior centers, for libraries, for fire departments, for police departments, for water departments, for DPW, for all of the services that our towns provide. They are subject to the exact same cost increases that we are. And we're very grateful to the folks in the towns who serve in the unglamorous roles of having to divvy up those resources to make sure that our towns work for everybody. Growing enrollments, increasing needs, and not only increasing needs in number, but increasing levels of need. Seeing things that even those of us that are kind of quote unquote old timers have not seen before. And the ever increasing cost of educating young people A through Z creates real challenges to sustainability and affordability. I'm grateful to Julia, grateful to the Superintendent's Association. An article from the Boston Globe hit my inbox today, both from Julia and from the Superintendent's Association, around, I think, 3 or 4 towns in particular in Eastern Massachusetts that we would probably step back and say, those are incredibly well-funded communities. Those are not communities that struggle to fund the things they need to fund in order to thrive. These are communities that are looking at sometimes overrides of millions of dollars. And then we look at some of the communities that struggle more from an economic perspective. And the loss of COVID money and some of the things that they're facing that, again, out here in our corner of the Commonwealth, we're not necessarily facing. We are among many, in fact, I would say the majority of districts in the Commonwealth of really looking around and going, we can get through this year, but we're going to have to maybe rob a little bit from next year in order to get through this year. And of course, that reminds all of us that this is perhaps not a long-term sustainable model that we can focus on. And so determining how and with what ideas and with what frequency to really be in communication with the state, be in communication with our own towns and town officials about how do we make this work this year, next year, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years from now is vital. And this requires communications, constant, open, transparent communications. And it really depends on having faith-filled, trust-filled partnerships and relationships within the communities that we're here to serve, Lanesboro and Williamstown primarily, and with folks across the state. And we're again very grateful that we have been having budget conversations with the finance committees from our two towns as we talk about adopting a budget tonight. We've been having months and months and months and months of conversations with those finance committees. And those finance committees have been having months and months and months of conversation among themselves, with other town officials, with other town boards. There has been a group that's been meeting for probably 5 or 6 months that's comprised primarily of Williamstown, but also inclusive of the Lanesboro Finance Committee that Carrie is a part of, that is looking at strategic and smart and sustainable ways to carry the debt for capital projects that the towns must have in order to move forward in safe and sustainable ways. And so I just, do have to say, as much as a lot of this news that we're talking about tonight is somber, and as much as it might sound like the annual exercise in hand wringing coming from the school district superintendent, this superintendent, this educational leader feels very fortunate to be serving communities where we talk about this stuff year round. So nobody is taken by surprise. And not only do we talk about it, but we work together to try to find ways to not only serve the school community best, but to serve the whole community that we're all here to serve. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think we can move on. And this is Joe doesn't like when I use this phrase, but this is when I kind of, hand over the English major part of the presentation to the economics major that's sitting on the screen. And certainly, we're both here and happy to answer questions as we go through the presentation. So thank you, Joe.
The way I actually described it earlier today was he can provide the inspiration for a few slides, and then I'll be the somber tour guide through the rest. Nothing that we're about to walk through is new. It's all the same stuff that we've covered over the last couple of months of meetings. So I'll just in case somebody does need to take a nap, I think I'm just going to hit upon the things that we really need to reinforce as we talk. So the budgeting challenges that we're facing this year, all of the usual things around salaries, health insurance, retirement contributions, some supplies and services costs increases, all of that's normal. And the growth there, quite honestly, is pretty normal, and in many ways would create a very pedestrian year for us within a 3% type increase normally. The things that are unusual are that at Mount Greylock Regional School, we've seen a significant rise in out-of-district tuition needs and the associated transportation and other services costs. At Lanesboro Elementary School, we have a number of teachers who are preparing for retirement in the coming years, and that triggers some contractual obligations around separation costs upon their retirement that we need to have additional funds in the budget for. And at Williamstown Elementary School, we have a continued heightened need for one-on-one assignments that has led to us really needing to carry forward more paraprofessionals into next year than perhaps when we were sitting here last year, we would have said we would be doing. So those are all the less usual things that make this, quite honestly, a more challenging year than we would like. All of that said, and this is no different from what you saw a couple weeks ago, we within our peer group, as well as within our geographic grouping, we're operating about as efficiently as we could possibly hope. And I like the fact that Julia highlighted during our last meeting that we're both a bargain and a value opportunity here for families. And I think it speaks volumes that we do have such a school choice in application set this year, that we are, even though we are third lowest in the county in terms of total per pupil expenditure, that we are really a beacon here within the county and generally doing quite well, although we've got plenty of room to grow. So these numbers we are certainly going to be taking to the town finance committees. They will see a variation of what you had during the budget workshop, so that they can digest that as well. Now, in terms of what we're doing with the budget that you have within your packet, and it was posted for the public a couple of days ago, we are still trying to work within retirements and planned departures. We are planning on not replacing one teacher at each of the 3 schools. So we'll see a slight staffing decrease as a result. We are in active conversations around Mount Greylock Regional School about what the increased cost structures that we're seeing mean in terms of both the present and the future for how we schedule and potentially what electives we offer at Mount Greylock. And we'll also be scaling back some of our general education summer programming as we look at this year and towards the future. Those are the things that we're doing to try to make this budget work in the bigger context. We're also spending more than we'd like from revolving accounts, tuition, choice, excess, and deficiency. We feel, I shouldn't use the word comfortable, but we feel as though it's the correct choice to do so. One, because if needed, we can accelerate the scheduling and curriculum changes at Mount Greylock in time for FY26, so that we don't continue to erode the balances in those accounts at the pace that we are planning on doing for FY25. We're also working with our towns, and they are hearing us when we say that we do need help. We cannot sustain these percentage increases year over year and maintain or preferably enhance the programming that we offer. It's just not financially possible. And I think it's per the conversations that we've had with them, and also just the point at which we are at internally is that we are fortunate enough to have funds on hand. Our towns want us to spend those funds before we go out and raise property taxes any more significantly than they are currently planning on needing to do in order to get into FY25 and as they look ahead. Those reserves exist for moments like this, where we have certain costs that have jumped up in a way that our towns cannot cover. That said, in terms of that stability, this is the same table that you saw, of course, during the budget workshop. I did add in the fiscal year 25 projections for revenue that we have for both tuition and choice. These numbers are numbers that many school districts would be very envious about. That said, they are also numbers that protect us from needing to go back to towns mid-year saying that we've got costs that we can't cover. And they are numbers where once they decrease, bringing them back up is a difficult task. So we don't take this lightly, but at the same time, this does seem like the moment, if there is ever a moment, to actively utilize them while carrying on the conversations about what we're going to do next, given that this is the state that we are we are navigating. So now the FY25 budget PDF that you have within your packet, that's where we can turn our attention to in a moment. I will say that nothing has changed materially from it. There were some small tweaks within numbers, but nothing different conversationally from what you had during the budget workshop. So I think we should probably open it up to conversation now. I can certainly put things up on the screen, but I think everybody's got it if they want to be scrolling around. So with that, yes, Carrie.
So did we get any feedback from the towns after our budget workshop about their ability to contribute more?
We did. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens during our meetings with the finance committees of the two towns. I think both town halls heard us loud and clear. At this stage in their budgeting process, I think given that we're working with two towns and they're in different stages within all of their conversations internally, I think everybody wants to contribute more. It's possible that one town is saying, let's go on ahead and try to do it, and the other town is saying, we're not so sure, we need to figure that out. But I think that's part of the joy and the challenge of working within a regional context is that we're not really dealing with one conversation, we're dealing with a community of towns and their conversations. And so I think everybody's hearing us. Everybody wants to continue talking, but it isn't as though we have anything set that's saying, please do increase your appropriations this year.
I have more to say on that, but the slide prior to, so the slide that said budget summary, could you explain the first point that it would accelerate the changes to the curriculum? I mean, I know you talked about potentially needing to make changes, but how is that going to accelerate the changes that might be needed in the future?
The statement was around as we look towards FY26.
Right.
We're going to have a couple of different things that might happen. One thing might be that costs just disappear. That's not likely given what we're seeing. Another is that we enter the budget cycle and both towns know and are working on more significant percentage increases for us. And then the third would be we'd have this year to figure out how to change how we do our business at the middle and high school to decrease costs in FY26. So the statement was around, we are knowingly going into this coming year saying we're doing something that's not sustainable, but we've got a few different things that are all possible for as we look at FY26. One would be cost decreases just naturally. Another would be that we change the way we operate to decrease costs. And then the third would be more money comes from our two member towns.
Or the state or the federal government.
Or the state or the federal government. You know, those are levers that are much more difficult for us to actually pull. But
well, I'm not sure they're any more difficult actually. But I'll come back later if I give other people a chance.
Steve?
So building on what Carrie just said in her conversation with you and what you just said is I think we have enough so that we will be okay this year. We are fortunate that we have the reserves, but we are not adding positions. We are not adding things that we would all love to do. And I know this is painful to many members of the community. And so because of this, I'm going to bring up something I've brought up before, that we are elected to, unfortunately, sometimes discuss painful issues respectfully, but to put things on the table that have to be on the table. So I'm really worried about where things are going to be in another year or two. There are a lot of trends that move exponentially. And so the earlier you stop these spendings, the better. And so there's really three things we can do. One is we can advocate for economic development to increase the pie so that there's more to distribute. The second thing we can do is we can raise taxes and look for other sources of income. And the third is we can basically cut expenditures, and not just at the school, but we can look and see where is all the money in the state, where's all the money in the federal government going, what are the priorities, what are we spending money on? Because every dollar we spend on X is a dollar we don't have for something else. During the pandemic, I remember at one point we were told that we're bringing home kits for kids to test for COVID, and everybody should take them and use them because they're free. Well, we may not be directly paying for the kits, but the kits still cost money, and it's resources being allocated to the kits that could be allocated to something else. This doesn't mean it was wrong to send the kits home. It doesn't mean it was wrong for the kids to be testing, but it just means it's a conscious decision we have to make. And so I think everybody would support providing more money for the schools if you could wave a magic wand and do that without having to worry where those funds come from. But we have to be responsible, and we have to advocate to the state and to the federal government about where are our budget priorities. What are the state and federal government spending money on? And not just we have to spend more money on education, but where's that money going to come from? And so I won't go into too much detail right now as to where I think that should be, but I would love it if people would work with me on a resolution for the MASC about funding priorities in the future, because I really worry about where the budgets are going to be in future years, not just for us, but for the other towns. Thank you.
Julia?
Thank you, Steve. You went big. I was going to go smaller in thinking about what our options are. So in that presentation you shared, Joe, that your hope is that a year from now, if there's no additional revenue, we will have identified ways to change the schedule or the curriculum offerings at the middle high school to reduce costs. And I guess I'm curious. I feel like voting for this budget is also saying we believe that will happen, and that so that we don't have to continually have be dipping into our reserves as much. Can you just share a little bit about how that process works? What kinds of things might be I know you can't get into specifics per se, but what is the process and timeline for how that might work, and how we might be kept apprised or aware of where that, where you all are in that process?
Well, there are a few different angles that it will be approached. I mean, one is that throughout the administration within that building, as well as the district office, there will be conversations about how the schedule is built, whether or not we can make it any more efficient without losing any of the diversity of offerings and the really the choice that students have. That's one part of the conversation. Another part is, are there certain offerings that we can figure out how to offer in a way that's more cost effective, that does not require as many people to offer the same thing. And then the final, the final one that doesn't just involve reorganizing the way you approach things, would be to actually eliminate some opportunities. And all of those will happen at the school and the district level first. They will filter up to the school committee, and then decisions will be made. And Jake, I don't know if there's, I kind of set the table for process, but in terms of the spirit behind it, I think it's too early to say too much of it, of anything in detail.
Yeah, it is. We've been working for several weeks, maybe even a couple of months with really, as we kind of do year round, really digging into particularly the middle and the high school schedule around what starting with electives, just to be transparent, what electives, and then what is not being used, being used well, being used in ways that we appreciate and that we value, but perhaps not being used as efficiently. What teaching periods are not being used as efficiently as they could be, and what are some options to deal with that? And I think those are really the kind of things that we are looking at, from foreign language offerings to some core classes that just the way scheduling happens are not using class sizes that are maximizing what we could do, but nice to have, but not maximizing what we could do, and still likely be 50th percentile or above in terms of class size across the state. So we're really looking at those kind of things, and then even down to the nitty gritty of what softwares are we subscribing to that we don't absolutely have to have. They're nice to have, but we don't have to have. Looking at things like activity buses, like the late buses that run, north and south. Just really trying to think about how do we keep the core program intact, um, and do things that are going to hurt, but not mutilate. um, and that's where, and not to keep banging this drum, but in that first part of the presentation, this notion of needs expanding is really the challenge. And everybody that's ever worked in a school, and maybe every organization knows this. So maybe this is like kindergarten level lesson, but the race between needs expanding and resources we have to address those needs expanding. This is one of those years that we're just struggling to keep up. That the ability to provide resources is not keeping up with the growth of the needs, and that's really uh, going back to 2020 or so, the state, in my opinion, took a great leap forward in actually addressing what it costs to educate in an environment where we expect all students, and not just using the word all because it's nice to use, but actually meaning all students to learn at higher levels. So this is one of those years where some of the nice things that we do, some of which are beyond nice to really necessary for some kids, we may have to scale back and look at other ways of doing them that are more efficient.
So, Jose and Carrie, okay if I do a follow-up question here? Thank you. One part of my question was timeline, and it sounds like you're already doing that investigation. So you might even implement some changes to the schedule for 24, 25?
It is possible that we will implement some very light changes for 24, 25, but I think as Joe and I were having the conversation about, okay, how much money should we borrow from 2026 to make 2025 work? We knew that we could not even, not with we would not be serving the communities the way the communities deserve or expect of us if we didn't start planning at that moment for the fact that it's great to kick the can down the road, but at some point on our journey, we're going to catch up with that can. Yeah. And unlike larger forms of government, we can't keep kicking. We have to own the can at some point. So potentially some very, very, some light alterations to next year, but really looking at more substantial types of things for that for the following school year for fiscal 26, Joanne.
Yep, thank you. Because I can imagine you might be able to find the less controversial, less precious cuts to make for next year. But beyond that, to Steve's point, that hard decisions may have to get made. Hard decisions may have to get made here too, not just at the state level, but at our school level. And I know those take time and input from all the people. And so I just, I hope that we are kept apprised of that process pretty early in the year so that we know what direction we're moving in through the year.
Understood and agreed. And thank you for the point. Jose, I think you were maybe next.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. And I'm just going to follow on from Julia's points, and just I think this is sort of trying to choose my words carefully. I think it's a plea is probably the best word to choose here or to use here. A plea to our communities to recognize how difficult our situation is and how increasingly difficult it's likely to be moving forward. I hear language around, optimizing efficiency in the context of increasing sort of student needs. I think, Joe, as you demonstrated at Williamstown Elementary, the needs for one-on-one student support is probably higher this year than we might have expected. For folks who in Williamstown are, paying attention to some big conversations that are happening on our planning board and our finance committees, I think we can all agree that we're at a crossroads here for our communities. And I think kind of reiterating Julia's point and maybe expressing some concern about how our town finance committees are hearing this plea for help. And maybe even more importantly, how are they remembering this plea for help? In roughly a year's time, it's very likely that our very own school committee will have a very different, or at least a slightly different makeup than it does now. Our town finance committees, our planning boards, you name it. So where's the memory built in around these pleas for help and this recognition that, our school district, in terms of what we provide and the programming that we provide our students could be very different 2 years from now. And so maybe Joe and Jake, I don't know if you were feeling confident about, these conversations that you're having and how they'll be remembered. And if you're feeling confident that these pleas are going to be answered in some way, because I think our town budgets are just going to be, however strained they are now, they're likely to be even more strained going into the future. So how are you envisioning this going forward?
Go ahead, Joe.
I think there are a range of ways that this is working right now. I mean, one, I think that both of our towns have had a fair amount of consistency over time with respect to representation and conversations. We have not seen a lot of whiplash within our towns in that way, which I think is of real value. The Berkshire's article that was posted after the budget workshop, that headline will exist in Google for far longer than any of us will be in our seats and on our committees. And I think additionally, as we look at the conversation around this budget this year and what happens with the finance committee presentations over the next couple of weeks, there's a very different tone and a very different set of background and foundational information there for us to work with than we've had in the past. And so I think from bottom to top to bottom, the way we're approaching this is by necessity a multi-year continuing conversation. And so I feel good about that. I feel good that one, we're not blindsiding them. And two, that we are making it very clear that we cannot continue the way we are. And that this needs to be top of mind for everybody. And I think you see some of the other headlines, as I think you just pointed out, that the finance committees and the planning boards, that the folks looking at the mall property in Lanesboro, you know, that everybody knows that we either grow or we wither. And that is really the only way from an economic and community perspective that we can view the conversations. And so I think that's alive and well. And if everybody follows through and keeps it up, then I think we'll be in good shape.
Jose, I thought you were going to make a campaign announcement, but you know, I was going to say time and place, but you know, seriously, we have I think we have kind of a dual track of good fortune, and also just we understand the importance of reaching out to, you know, we really get in our district office, we really get that, you know, we're a regional school district, so we exist as an entity among ourselves, but we are completely and utterly dependent on two other completely separate entities, Lanesboro and Williamstown. And with town administrators now firmly in place, and you know, Gina, I think, is in her second or third year. Bob is in his second or third year. You know, the relationships we have, even if there's some turnover, I think we already know there's going to be turnover in the Lanesboro Finance Committee from reading the reporting in iBerkshires. You know, we're very grateful to those folks, but we're I hope we're not bothersome, but we are communicative. And so because we know that we depend on the towns, and the towns, a lot of their vitality, a lot of what they have to offer to anybody that's considering moving there, staying there, making a life there, is about what happens at Lanesboro Elementary, Williamstown Elementary, and Montgomery Lock Regional School. So you know, our team will remain communicative and be the holders of institutional memory, even if some of the town teams experience some change. Christina, Carrie, are you okay if we go to Christina and then come back to you?
That's not necessary. Her hand was up first, Jake.
Okay.
She wants, okay. So my question is about process. We did talk about the painfulness and the necessity of this particular budget, and we've talked about kicking the can down the road, and you know, sort of the trepidations around doing that, and choices that will have to be made in the future. My question is, process wise, Jake and Joe, if the committee votes for this, and when we go into our discussions with the finance committees, continue to express the pain and the trepidation behind this particular budget, if they say, you know, we can provide more this year, so it's not as painful, what does that process look like?
If we feel comfortable having both towns' finance committees support it, or if this school committee chooses to go with, say, one town support and hope that the other will support later, the process would be that the school committee would meet again and vote to amend whatever budget it might adopt tonight. And then those numbers, depending upon the timing, would either get printed into the town meeting warrants, or we would go up at town meeting, as we have a few times in the past, and amend whatever number people originally saw on sheets of paper on the floor of the meeting, so that that new number would be the one voted on. So it's very possible, and we've done it plenty of times in the past.
Great, thank you.
Am I up?
You have the floor.
Okay. So I understand the approach. I understand I understand the rationale, but I'd like to at least propose that there are other ways of doing this. We're essentially taking $300,000 more from our reserves because we have a $3,000 extraordinary cost, right? Or extraordinary expense. This is not a curricular expense. This is not an expense that we could have anticipated. It's a very important expense, right? It has to do with how we care for our kids, how we educate our kids. But it could also be looked at as a community expense, right? There are 3 partners at the table. There are 2 towns and the Mount Greylock Regional School District, which is a municipality. So let's just say there are 3 municipalities. Couldn't we split this extraordinary cost amongst us evenly? And all right, if all the children involved in the extraordinary expense are from one town, I would understand why that might be difficult. But the concept is that we all have reserves. And why not spread out the use of the reserves to our partners for what is an extraordinary expense? And then we all work to figure out how to maybe do things differently moving forward. So that's point number 1. I'd just like us to consider it. Point number 2 is that when we developed this regional budgeting system, right? The model, it's a new model. You, Joe, and Steve both worked on it. We assess each town for its elementary school, and we assess according to the original regional agreement for the Mount Greylock Regional School District. Should not that give us some flexibility in meeting the needs of the elementary schools, if not the region? I mean, I understand that you try to meet a need at Williamstown Elementary, you're going to have to raise the assessment overall, which is going to raise the assessment to Lanesboro. So what was the point? And I'm just kind of being a little over the top here, but what was the point of doing that if we can't meet the needs of the element, if we can't allow the towns to meet the needs of their elementary schools? So again, these are things that you've probably considered and just kind of taken off the table, but wondering what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Just taking the first thought, I think that's a very viable, valuable opinion from the school committee that should be discussed and taken wherever the school committee wants it taken. On the second, if we were showing extraordinary costs at one of the 2 elementary schools, unlike in a normal region, for lack of a better descriptor, we probably would be in a position where we'd be having a conversation with the one town, as opposed to the regional community saying, here's something that we need to manage. We need your input as to whether you want us to manage that by cutting or by you you approaching it as an expense that's extraordinary that you can handle the burden of. Because we're seeing such increases at the shared middle high school, that middle high school, given the way the regional agreement is written, as well as which is identical to the way all regional schools in Massachusetts really, all other regions have it across all of their schools, but I think every school has it for its shared middle high school because that is the most common setup for regions. It's split on a per pupil basis, and there isn't really the flexibility to say, well, if one town can provide more than the other town, then let's.
Let me clarify. It wasn't actually the 300,000 in extraordinary expenses I was referring to. I was referring to, you know, we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that at the elementary schools. Or we're not going to, you know, add this, or we're not going to replace this person. Or if there are things that we felt, and this might be hypothetical because maybe this isn't the case here, but if there are things that we felt were really going to have a highly negative impact on an elementary school because we weren't going to do it, would the town in which that elementary school sat, would they have an opportunity to say, no, we want to fund that because we're paying for that budget? Or does it just add, I mean, I'm asking for it again, it's a procedural question.
Yes, hypothetically, and it would not necessarily, as with all regional things, because we are our own municipality, that conversation would be initiated by the school committee.
Right.
And brought to the town saying, let's say there was, you know, and there very well could be in future years. Let's say there is a massive textbook replacement effort at one of the two elementary schools. You know, that's the kind of thing where the conversation could happen with that one town hall around. This is something that we need to do. Do we do it in 1 year, which is better, or do we spread it out over 2 or 3 years, which is not as good? You know, that theoretical conversation is one that we certainly can have, given the way our assessments are set up.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Julia, I don't know if I should be calling on folks or what, but
I think you should be. Since you called on me. I'm teasing. So just Carrie's making me think a lot. So thank you, Carrie, at this late hour. So the second question feels to me like it gets at maybe at like, what does it mean to be regionalized? And are we one district, or are we still two different towns sharing? I'm trying to like, I'm trying to work that out in my mind. Like it feels like trying to, I don't like that question is there at this, and the question around the potential proposal to ask the three bodies to split the extraordinary cost. I'm wondering if that opens up questions around what is an extraordinary cost, so when is it appropriate to do that and when isn't it? But also, I think these can happen. Like, what do we do with extraordinary windfalls? Like, how do we think about those as well? So I love the idea. And I don't want to tap into our reserves any more than we have to, but I'm also wondering about what doors that opens, or what questions that opens.
I mean, the extraordinary windfalls might go into E&D and then be used for future years, right? They could also be used, you know, for, I'm not sure what an extraordinary windfall would be. It might be, you know, the COVID resources, which would allow us not to pass on the costs, additional costs to the towns. So they benefit the district, but they clearly also benefit the town. Anything that benefits the district benefits the towns, right? But not everything that benefits the towns benefits the district. So even though I make the argument that we are three partner municipalities, we are clearly interwoven and connected with different responsibilities to each other. But I would like to propose, and this isn't quite a motion because I'm more like just throwing this out there. I would like to propose that rather than increasing the assessment by $100,000 to either town, why don't we at least take a stab at this and say 50,000, right? Let's add 50,000 to each town as 1/3 of this extraordinary expense. Or, you know, we could say, we're going to take half of it and the two towns are going to take half of it and we'll split that. I can't split 150. And well, of course I can, but 75 to each, right? I mean, what do people think about that? And is there a fault in my logic? That's what I'm looking for, is like somebody's got to tell me where the fault is, because there may be one.
Carrie, but before I ask Steve to jump in with a raised hand and then Ursula to jump in with a raised hand, I think a challenge I would have, I don't even know if it's a challenge I would have, but I think it would be a challenge is in, okay, that's define extraordinary cost. If we're thinking about it like from a capital perspective, a couple of years ago, we were meeting frequently with folks in Lanesboro around the extraordinary cost of replacing a boiler. And then replacing a second boiler that was a similar age, same make, same model, and we knew was at some point going to reach the end of its life. But those were two really finite, we're going to spend X amount of money this fiscal year, X amount of money next fiscal year. And then we expect you to take care of these boilers, and we don't hear about boilers for another 20 or 25 years. I think one of the challenges with looking at extraordinary costs related to special education, and that's where I would focus in on, because I think it's where you were focusing in on, is that, you know, when ideally we do see, you know, special education is meant to be making a level academic learning field for a student. And ideally, that student's skills are increasing every year. And hopefully by the time that most students get to the middle school or the high school, that those services, there's a reduction in those services that's not for financial purposes, not for personnel purposes, but for the purposes of supporting as independent of an adult life as can humanly be made for that student. When we look at the students we're talking about, for instance, at Mount Greylock Regional School, you know, we're looking at extraordinary costs that we know for the most part are going to be incurred in fiscal 25, fiscal 26, fiscal 27, fiscal 28. Yeah, we're talking about, in some of these cases, sixth graders coming into seventh going into eighth. We also know the students that will be transitioning from our budget onto another state agency's budget. But I think that would be one of the pushbacks from the town, is that from a town perspective, an extraordinary cost is, you know, this fire engine failed, and now we have no way of reaching a building that's more than 3 stories high. This is an extraordinary cost. We need to replace this ladder truck. I think it's a little more challenging to make that case for costs that we know right here, right now, we're going to continue to incur for 4 or 5 or 6 fiscal years into the future.
I'm not sure it should be different. I totally understand what you're saying, but I'm not
sure it should be either, but I think that would be a fair response, or maybe an anticipated response. Steve and then Ursula.
Yeah, just really quickly, one of the problems of being in a small district is a small number of cases can have a huge impact for a small number of years, whereas in a big district, that would be noise that would just be drowned out. And so from a budget perspective, it's extremely challenging when you have something like this. This is one of the reasons why in a lot of the regionalization formulas, we use averages over several years to try to reduce the shock of something like this. The other thing which I wanted to add, for what it's worth to the conversation, I have no objection to reaching out to the towns and seeing what their thoughts are. But I remember the conversations we had about the fields, where I was, very much in favor of trying to get the towns to take out, bonds, and then have the Williams endowment have the interest from that paying off the bonds and keeping that money in the endowment earning more interest. And there was a lot of pushback for stuff like that. And so, for what it's worth, that would have given us potentially a revenue stream if the market is doing well. But the message we were getting from the finance committees was to spend the money we have now, not to keep the money in reserve.
Thanks, Steve. Ursula?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to agree, Carrie, with your position. And I never really thought about it that way, but I do think that if we think about special education and the costs that we need to, do right by our kids, we tend to roll it into the school budget and think about it that way. But I agree that it really is a community expense, right? And we all have to take care of our kids, and it could be any one of our kids that needed services, and we all need to support that. I think that's a great idea. I think we should recommend it. And I would just, Steve, I understand your point about the track. I think that I don't know whether we call this extraordinary or not, or whether we can, but it's a little bit different for something where we can't choose to postpone, or we can't choose to put it off or not do it. This is something we have to do as taxpayers, not as a school district, as towns, right? So I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I think that we should try that. It shouldn't be blamed on the school district for spending extra money. It's something that has to happen for our towns.
Thanks, Ursula. Julia?
I would love to find ways not to dip into our reserves. So I'm just trying to think about the alternate perspectives here as well. One of which is going back to Jake's opening slide, that all of our students are ours, and apportioning, saying, well, this is a community, something the community needs to support, but all of this is what the school will support. But the reality is the community is supporting the schools. Like I'm confused about this. Go ahead, Carrie.
I would just say that if the other way to do it is to take 700,000 out of our reserves rather than $1 million, and to put the 300 right into the budget and see, ask the towns to support the increases.
I would personally feel better about not isolating and saying this is
Sure.
a particular need. And then we aren't in the issue of what isn't.
We put again, we say we're splitting it. We're going to put 150,000 back into the budget and reserve 150 of our reserves. We're going to ask you, our member towns, to use some of your reserves as well to support our budget.
And I like that idea because we both have reserves. So why are we the ones going into our reserves for this? That makes more logical sense to me than pulling out one particular expense.
Jose?
Yeah, just a couple questions maybe to help me, in this conversation that we're having, that this idea that Carrie's raised and that Julie just asked questions about. So I guess this is a two-part question. One, can we translate this drawdown in reserves on the order of $1 million? Like, how quickly, if we didn't no longer needed to draw down from our reserves, how quickly could we recoup that, like in terms of years of revenue? Like what are we talking about in terms of how quickly or how long it would take to build those reserves back up by the amount that we're going to draw them down? The second question is, Jake and Joe, I'm trying to think about the best way to ask this question without maybe I'll just ask it just outrightly. Is in terms of what has been communicated to you both from our finance committees, was there a messaging, implicit or not, that if we were to draw down our reserves in this way to minimize as best we can the asks on our member towns, is there the expectation then that in subsequent years, next year, the following year, and so on, that our member towns might similarly utilize their reserves to help support the district's budget? You know, something like that. Is that some messaging that I don't know if that's fair to even ask, but that's the question that I've got.
All right. There's a lot. There's a lot on the table here. I think a number of people within our town halls, and perhaps I also view, rather than it being three parties like a triangle, it's more like a waterfall where the school district is serving the educational needs of the entire community. The school district has reserves. If there are needs that are going to trigger more significant calls for money from our communities than is comfortable, the first place that we look is internally. What can we do before we then turn back and we say, there's nothing more that we can do. We need your help further down the chain. And that's partly because like our reserves are only available for use for education. You know, the town's reserves are there for education as well as the other needs that they serve. The other thing that I think is being said is that they're trying to keep an eye on their tax rates, and they're trying to figure out how to manage when there's growth, when there are new developments, or when existing properties come back onto the tax rolls because somebody new owns them and they're redeveloping them or whatever it is, that triggers new funds being available. If that doesn't happen, then the towns are sitting there saying, well, we need to increase our property tax rates, and here's what will happen to each family's property tax bills. And so I think that the towns are more saying that if you've got the money in the bank, spend that before you start taking it in the form of property tax increases, if possible. I think that's the translation. In terms of to what degree, you know, I don't think there are ever promises that if you do this in one year, then we promise that next year. But I do think that every conversation that I've had with a finance committee member or with a town administrator has gone to the idea that if you can hold this down this year, one, we'll be appreciative, and two, we understand that we need to come up with more in subsequent years. Now, whether or not that actually pans out, there is no, you know, there is no multi-year deal in municipal budgeting. So I wouldn't want to represent that there is any kind of assurance, because that wouldn't be true. Did I address everything, or did I leave one off?
And I think maybe to, you know, Carrie's question that was followed on by Julia, you know, could we translate this drawdown, our drawdown on district reserves, into how long it took us to accumulate that amount in the first place? What are we talking about in terms of a loss?
Well, if a school district's budget is really accurate, then you're going to spend all the money that you bring in, and you're not going to bring in any more money than you need to spend. So your E&D would just, except for in a case where you're drawing down from your E&D, it would stay the same from one year to the next. That said, I think the way that is most likely for our school district, given the position that we're in right now, to see E&D increase would be when the state, long after our budget is adopted, increases Chapter 70 funding or increases other revenue that goes to our general fund. You know, that isn't a one-year grant, but instead is something where they say this goes to your general fund. Then that means that we've got more revenue coming in than we thought. Because our assessments don't change. You know, the revenue coming in off assessments, that's going to be whatever is voted at our town meetings. So the only way that E&D grows is if somehow we over budget, if we have too much in our budget and we don't need to spend it all, or if the revenue coming in from the state is somehow in excess of what we're currently projecting, and that would end up going to our bottom line.
If I could just translate that, Joe, just to make sure I understood it, one way to understand this draw on the reserves is that this is a real draw with no expectation that we'll ever be able to. It's unclear whether that money will ever, similar amount will ever be available again in the future, right? That's one way. It could be a permanent loss. Could you just very quickly, and apologies that I'm sure you and Jake have already done this already, just quickly remind us all, and for folks who might be listening in, what are some typical uses in an average year of the reserve? What do we typically call on it for?
Can I just answer that from the finance committee perspective? I mean, reserves are used every year to, in the sense that school choice money comes in every year, and we don't just put it in, add it to the reserves. We use it to keep our assessments down. That is the annual use of reserves, is to keep the assessments within, and that's what we're doing again this year. It's just that we have to use more of it, right? Yeah. It's not that we shouldn't ever use our reserves. Of course we use them. And I think that should be understood, that we're not just socking money away, unless we had to keep a bond rating up or something for a big, bond issue. We're protecting the district. I mean, it's the risk factor that is really, I think, troubling me here, which is why I think we should spread out the risk. I'll wait though. Jose, you have more to ask?
No. That was really helpful, Carrie. And this is one of those things that you'd think I would have known this by now, but that was very helpful to me. Maybe the other question is why don't we just draw them down to zero to really benefit our member towns and minimize their assessments to the max? Why don't we just do that?
You can take that one.
And this is one where we're thinking about it constantly, but I would feel very uncomfortable if our reserves were smaller than any 1 year extraordinary expense that we might see. So let's say we have, just using the example that has been featured within this budget, unfortunately, is let's say we have 5 students over the course of the summer develop needs that trigger significant out-of-district tuition costs. Could we manage that within our own funding without needing to go back to our member towns and say, you need to hold a special town meeting so that we can do this, or we need to lay people off mid-year to make it work. So the situation that we're putting ourselves into for FY25 still leaves me comfortable that we are not going to be saying that, even if we have some extraordinary, truly extraordinary event, like the equivalent to a 100-year storm for how something is built or how it can handle. So I feel comfortable with this budget because we are keeping the money in reserve across tuition and choice, as well as E&D, that keep us in good financial shape in that way. So that's why we don't spend them down to zero. But this kind of a year is just not something that we can do repeatedly and still have that strength.
So could you, Joe, tell us what kind of percentage increases we would be looking at in assessments if we put 150,000 back in the budget? Just doesn't have to be wholly accurate.
Oh, I mean, I've got the,
okay.
Hearing you speak earlier, I figured I would just go on ahead and hop right into the spreadsheet. So if we decreased our transfer from E&D down from 475,000 to 325,000,
Mm-hmm.
so if we effectively increase assessments by 150,000,
yep.
Given the assessment apportionment, 68% of that would go to the town of Williamstown, 32% would go to the town of Lanesboro, which would increase assessments in a way that would change the percentage increases to 3.8 for Lanesboro and 4.3 for Williamstown, up from what we've been talking about, which is 3.02 for Lanesboro and 3.54 for Williamstown.
All right, so it's like a percentage increase. It's a full percentage. And half of that would be half a percentage, right? Mm-hmm. So if we put 75 back in.
Yeah, so if we were to make it, if we were to increase assessments by $100,000 rather than 150, mm-hmm. It would be 3.54% increase for Lanesboro, 4.05 for Williamstown. I'll just say, just from the seat that I'm in, the increases that we need to be looking at for next year, we need to be looking at more like here's a 4.5% and a 5.5% type increase. Like we need to be honest about, and that's part of why I would rather have it come through in a conversation as opposed to just saying, well, we're going to take more than we ever talked about right now, and then we're going to need to take more next year. Like I guess I feel like
we have talked about it though. We haven't presented it, but they know what position we're in. I think it's like it would be a more gradual approach. It would spread the risk this year, and then maybe we could even find ways collectively to to improve things for the following year. It buys everybody a little more time. Rather than keeping it at 3% and then jumping to 5% and 6%. Curtis.
Thanks. Sorry. Sorry, I've been so quiet. Everyone's been saying all of my thoughts, which is very convenient. In regards to first, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how great it is that we're not debating the budget or the components of the budget, merely the sourcing of the budget. And part of that is because there's been no new twist in the information that we processed the last time we were together as a committee, and part of that is just the sound nature of the budget that doesn't have everything we want, but we believe has everything we need to keep moving toward the goal of developing everything we want for our students and our communities. So it's great to have that as the backbone of all of this. I don't want that to go unmentioned. In terms of reducing the drawdown from those funds, if we were to say take back 70,000, that'd be 22,400 for Lanesboro and the remaining 57,600 for Williamstown by my math of the apportionment, which I estimate would be three tenths of a percent increase, somewhere around there. Am I right?
Yep, 3.38 for Lanesboro, 3.9 for Williamstown.
So something like that, or 60. I feel like there is a number between where we are now and the sticker shock that we do not want to bring to the towns, but is indicative of exactly what Carrie and others have been talking about, which is that to avoid a drastic increase in ask next year, which is not only potentially possible, but likely, that we have that small increase as a way of saying we're keeping our foot in this door, because we were all there for the conversations last year at this time where the towns were explicit in the percentages that they were comfortable bringing to the table, and we did a lot of work to stick to those. And at that time did so with, I felt, at least in the meeting in Lanesboro, with the understanding that this is not necessarily sustainable to keep meeting the percentage that the town administrations are asking for all of the reasons that we've talked about. So I'm wondering, even if it's, and I don't want to use the word gesture here, but even if it's the gesture of 50,000 less, and what that apportionment looks like and what that percentage is, it's the stark reminder that the landscape of funding our schools, thanks in part to state management and thanks in part to just the changing costs of our needs for our community, we're going to be looking for more. We can't do 3% every year. They want 3%, is basically what I'm saying, not to be brusque about it, but I'm wondering if there is a number like 50,000 or 60 that will be less of a drawdown on the reserve. We're still drawing down more than we want, but we also understand the reality of the town's needs and their administration's needs and the citizens' needs. And if that's a number we can find now, you know what I mean?
So 70,000 was 3/10. Keeps Williamstown under, wait, I gotta bring the budget back. Yeah, keeps Williamstown just under 4 and keeps Lanesboro under 3.5.
Yes, 70, if we decrease E&D use by 70,000.
Yep.
Then Lanesboro's increase would be 3.38% and Williamstown's increase would be 3.9%.
And I implicitly trust the judgment of those who have been communicating with the town administrations and making the case for what we need. And if they feel that, you know, what the percentage is at a $50,000 reduction is more suitable for the conversations that have been had thus far, but I do feel like pushing a little bit now will make the pushing that I fear we will need to do next year less painful and surprising, both to the administrations and to the towns. I mean, to the people in town who are not only family members of students in our district, but who are benefited by the service of our police officers and firefighters, many of whom are graduate products of our district, even before regionalization, obviously. I just think something. So if it's, say, 60,000, that's
I'm sticking with 70. Sorry.
I'm gonna let Carrie. I threw the pass. Carrie has caught the pass. These are yards after the catch. I defer to Carrie's judgment in the terms of the amount of the ask.
I'm not sure I defer to my judgment on this, but I think we should try. I think we have an obligation to try.
and
So
if I were to try to make the case to the people of the town, if this were being watched by any or all of them, I would say that over the year leading up to and including last year's budget, the price of everything in our community increased by 20 to 70%, depending on what goods, services, products, and needs you're talking about. But we managed to not increase the percentage ask of the town an exorbitant amount from the previous year. This is us catching up a little bit with that. So while the price of many goods and services and gas has finally had some tapering off in some parts, aside from corporate price gouging, I think that it's completely appropriate to say to the people of the towns, this is the price of this actually finally going up, because what was our percentage increase from last year, from 2 years ago to last year in terms of town ask? I hate to make you do the deep dive on that, but
2.96 and 3.13 for Lanesboro and Williamstown, respectively.
And so for Lanesboro to be at 3.02 is actually down 0.1% from last year's ask. If I'm doing those numbers correct. Is it 3.02 or is it 3.2?
If we do 70, it's 3.382.
Right. I'm just saying the current
Yeah.
current budget proposal as
the actual increase from FY23 to FY24 for Lanesboro was 2.96. What was in the packet tonight was 3.02.
Gotcha.
So slightly higher as a percentage increase than last year.
Right.
So to move this along, we should vote on something because it's already 7:30.
Carrie, I'll paste the motion in just so that into the chat so that everybody sees it and has it.
Yeah, is the chat active? It's disabled.
Oh, okay.
I can enable it.
Okay.
Should be there.
All
right. Just give me a second. I'm always terrified when I do this. That I'm going to.
And just as a note, while Joe was doing that, we skipped over the agenda item of public comment, but there was no public comment in our email, and there was not any member of the public within this realm tonight. So my apologies on that. We sort of went right from public hearing into discussion. So.
Also, sorry for my lateness. And did we approve the minutes? I missed that.
That's after.
Oh, okay. Good. I wouldn't want to miss that.
We needed you, Curtis.
Hey, I'm much happier being in the Zoom and talking about this than missing it. So
there is one member of the public present, but he does not wish to speak.
Thanks, Stephen.
Oh.
We consider you an official of your own right.
Yeah.
All right, I'm trying to make sure the motion captures the how we're different right now from the original document, so there's no confusion. And I believe this. Oh boy.
it's the same bottom line, right?
Yep,
Or-
yeah,
Same
it's,
budget, yeah. Okay.
wait, sorry. It says FY23 in there, which let me see if I can edit that comment. Just so there's no, well, here, I'm going to delete the comment.
Oh, no.
I also got halfway through it.
Mhm.
Tired eyes.
Curtis, we're gonna make you read it.
Oh, Lord. Is that final copy? So that reads, the motion to accept the FY25 Mount Greylock Regional School District budget and associated assessments as discussed for the period from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 in the amount of $27,411,716 for the FY25 operating budget and $1,659,575 for the FY25 capital budget. This reflects a decrease in E&D use from $475,000 to $400,000 for the FY25 budget. The FY25 operating and capital assessments to our member towns are as follows. The town of Lanesboro, $508,186 capital and $5,698,161 operating, and the town of Williamstown, $1,151,389 capital and $12,623,946 on dollars operating. Wow, I almost made it.
And I'm sorry to say it, but somehow I copied and pasted from the spreadsheet, but it didn't. The
So that's the
Lanesboro
amended
operating number should be
Operating or capital? That's closer to
the
capital.
Lanesboro operating number should be 5,917,186.
Right. Operating. Got it.
Do you
I don't know
accept that
how-
amendment?
I put that into the document I read out loud.
Yeah. Are you motioning? Are you making the motion, Curtis?
I might as well, since it's there to make. I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I will second it.
thank you.
Can I?
Discussion.
Yes, thank you. So the statement that says this reflects a decrease in E&D use from 475 to 400,000 for the FY25 budget. Should that be, I just don't know, should that be made clearer? That is for the use for the Mount Greylock Regional School, and the decrease is from what was originally presented, right?
And yes. And I apologize, folks.
We're putting you on the spot.
Yeah, Joe,
400,000.
you're doing
I
a
should have
great
typed
job.
405,000 because it was a decrease of 70,000, not a decrease of 75,000. And that is only for Mount Greylock Regional School. Yes. Would you like for me to try to read a revised motion that cleans up my errors?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Joe.
Okay. I'm sorry again.
No, don't apologize.
I don't know how my video keeps on turning off. I didn't do it. Somebody's moving against me here tonight. Would somebody like to move a motion to accept the FY25 Mount Greylock Regional School District budget?
Sorry, let me stop you. It's already been moved and seconded, so this would be a revision, right?
Would the mover and seconder of the motion that's on the floor accept an amendment to?
No, then we have to vote an amendment. Why don't, Curtis, you want to?
I withdraw the motion.
Take it as a friendly amendment.
No, it's all right.
The motion has been withdrawn.
Yep.
And Joe will read a new motion. Thank you.
Would somebody like to move a motion to accept the FY25 Mount Greylock Regional School District budget and associated assessments as discussed for the period from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 in the amount of $27,411,716 for the FY25 operating budget and $1,659,575 for the FY25 capital budget. This reflects a decrease in E&D use for Mount Greylock Regional School from $475,000 to $405,000 for the FY25 budget. The FY25 operating and capital assessments to our member towns are as follows. The town of Lanesboro, $508,186 in capital and $5,917,186 in operating. And the town of Williamstown, $1,151,389 in capital and $12,623,946 in operating.
So,
Curtis.
Before you move it, actually, could I just suggest we put in Julia's words of from what was originally presented after that, where it talks about the decrease in E&D.
okay. Works for me.
Curtis?
With that insertion, so moved.
Second.
Carrie seconds. Okay. Any further discussion?
Joe's still thinking about whether he has the right numbers. No.
Joe, thank you for
yeah, thank you.
That quick movement. Appreciate it. Okay. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor?
Owen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. Not easy ever. Okay, so moving on. Approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the February 29th, 2024 special school committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Curtis moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Julia seconds. Any discussion?
I really just wanted in the record gratitude for the note taker who also notes the time in the video, which I think is just such a brilliant way to capture the conversation. So gratitude.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, all in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Henry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Malloy, abstain.
Miller, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. Okay. Jake. I don't see Jake.
Mr. Schutz is having technical difficulties. He did send me along a highlighted version of just some changes to the Mount Greylock Regional Schools program of studies, which I am happy to share with you all.
Do you want to flip flop with no? I don't want to put Noelle on the spot, but she's here. Do you want to?
Those minutes are not going to help given the nature of the challenges. So I can read the changes. Those of you that have children in the school will get this tomorrow in an email, or we can have Jake come back in April. So whatever your pleasure is, I'm happy to just share them tonight.
Great.
So
Thank you.
you know. And it's interesting as we're, looking how to do really interesting things in more efficient ways. What Jake mostly was going to share with you tonight are changes that I think really add interest and depth. Not increasing FTEs, but just really through scheduling and rearranging it through some things being offered one year and some things in an alternate year. Several new electives in the visual arts, in the visual arts. There is a new sculpture class that is coming online, and then a couple of performing arts classes. The first is the history of rock and roll music, and the second is a general music theory course. I think I read yesterday that Westfield State is adding a Taylor Swift course of class to their so we're not quite that progressive to add Taylor Swift, although when and if we do, Mr. Bergeron will have to cross over and perhaps be guest lecturer. Given his household makeup, I have a hunch he's quite expert. Courses that are rotating back into the Mount Greylock Regional School course of studies this year are advanced placement in biology, in astronomy, in forensics, and in social studies. Also under social studies, 2 new electives rotating back in genocide studies, which is an incredibly valuable class, and America and Vietnam in the 1970s. Also rotating back in under the fine arts categories, portfolio photography, and electives in film studies and creative writing. There is a new class in the math department that is really one that we can track directly back to student data and student need from the elementary school, but looking at several years worth. We are having an integrated math class this year and an elements of math in the middle school, just really addressing the fact, looking at our scores, looking at now that we have a new benchmarking tool to really see where kids are. We have much more powerful formative assessments rather than depending on MCAS and just grades, and really looking at the fact that we have to address some really significant need in mathematics in order to have students prepared for the 10th grade MCAS and then for life beyond the 10th grade MCAS. The personal finance course was moved out of just general elective world and into mathematics world, which means that students will now need 35 math credits in order to graduate rather than 30. That personal finance course is a class that students need to take in order to have our program go through. Most students need to take. There are some exceptions. It's a very powerful course. I've sat in on a few sessions this year and a few presentations, and it's stuff that I wish I had known when I entered into grown-up world, and fortunately, I married somebody that did, but I'm fortunate in that way. And other than that, there's really no substantive changes. We are grateful to see some classes rotating back in. We are mindful of what these budgetary conversations we had tonight, and we appreciate that all of you appreciate that some of the decisions we're making now are going to impact what students are able to take in their 25-26 school year. And certainly any questions about this, I'm happy to take a stab at, or we can pass on to Jake to catch us up the next time he's available. Okay, thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the Academic Support Director report. So I will turn it over to Noelle Sullivan.
Okay. So I'm a little thrown off because this is the Academic Support Director, Director of Special Education.
Yep, sorry, using okay. Old terminology.
Okay, my first time here, so I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. No, I just want to thank you for having me here. Jake asked me to come on and talk to you a little bit about the tier focus monitoring process that we have coming up. I don't know if you've all been through it before or if it's new, so I'll just give kind of a quick overview and talk about where we are in the process. The reason behind the monitoring process is to make sure that our district is implementing our special education and our civil rights requirements, and making sure that we're doing it in a way that gives our students the best positive outcomes. And there's 2 groups that they put us in, Group A or Group B. And each group looks at kind of different elements of those two worlds in the district. Group A looks at identifying students with special needs, IEP development, the programming and support services that we offer, and equal opportunity. That's Group A. We're in Group B. So specifically the things they're looking at right now during this cycle for us is licensure and professional development, facilities and classrooms that are specifically related to special needs, and multi-language learners, oversight of programs and services, time and learning, the parent and community engagement for our students, and equal access. So like I said, we're in Group B, and within each group, there's 3 years of the cycle. So year 1 is your self-assessment year. That was last school year, so 2022-23 for Mount Greylock. And so last year, the district reviewed the special education and civil rights documentation and processes that we had, and we had to upload a whole bunch of information to the DESE portal, sort of showing them what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're being accountable for that. And then year 2, which is this year, is our on-site monitoring year. So Michelle Hennessy-Kowalczyk is our district coordinator. She came to the district in November. She met with Patrick Priester and Joel Bruckner, and they kind of reviewed what was uploaded last year, and she gave us some technical assistance, meaning, you know, this looks great, but this is where it needs to be tweaked. You need a little work with this, you need a little work with that. So we're in the process of kind of looking at the areas that they determined could be a concern and doing that tweaking and uploading the information back up to the portal so they can check and, you know, make sure that we're hitting on what they're looking for. And then her team, Michelle and 1 or 2 other members of her team will be coming back here the week of May 13th. They'll be here for 2 days, and that is our on-site visit, and that will entail interviews with administrative staff, interviews with some of the staff in the schools. And Michelle and I really looked at the sorts of specific things she was looking for and determine which staff members are going to best be able to speak with her and answer her questions about those specific things within the special education or civil rights realm. She'll be doing some interviews with any CPAC representatives or any other parents or general members of the public that ask for interviews. They'll be sending surveys to all the parents of students that have disabilities regarding their experiences in our district with the special education process. Those surveys will be sent by DESE. They should be going home the week of April 13th. So parents will be having an opportunity to share their experiences. And then the last part of their 2 days here will be tours of all 3 buildings. So we'll be looking at all of the spaces that are used to deliver any special education services. So any special education classrooms, any related service classrooms, so PT, OT, speech classrooms, any spaces that are used to regulate behavior. And those are really, you know, they're really specifically just looking for those spaces. It's not just kind of a general tour. They're looking for anything and everything, but they're really just honing in on those spaces. At the end of her interviews and tours, she'll have a meeting with Jake and Joe and I and Joelle and kind of walk us through what her reflections are from those couple of days. And then I believe it's within a couple of months, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong on that, we'll be getting our report from the state, and they'll put us in a tier. So tier 1 being the best tier that you can be in, and that there, you know, they'll give you feedback. Of course, there's always things we can do better. They'll give us some feedback on some things that we can work to improve on. In tier 1 and 2, we'll write a continuous improvement plan, and you kind of self-monitor and self-improve in that way. Tier 3 and 4, it requires more of a continuous action plan where the state would be really more involved in helping your district make those changes to meet the regulations. So we are in motion. The work is being done. We are having a parent orientation for all parents in the district have been invited. We send a message home through Parent Square yesterday to all district families, inviting them to a Zoom meeting. Michelle or someone from her team will be giving that parent orientation, but it really just walk them kind of sort of like this, but in more detail, step by step through the process, what it means for the district, what the outcomes they'll be looking for, and they'll have an opportunity to ask questions and whatnot. And then actually following that meeting, we're hoping to kind of piggyback a CPAC meeting on that. I haven't had a chance to meet with them yet, so hopefully I'll have an opportunity to meet the members of the CPAC and start to make those connections as well. So that's kind of a very long process in a very short time, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thanks, Noelle. Any questions for Noelle, Carrie?
I was just wondering, how often does this happen? I know that you're coming in and having to compress it, but what is the cycle?
So there's 2 3-year cycles, basically 6 years. So you're either group A or group B, and each one of those is 3 years.
Okay.
So every year 2,
yeah,
which ends up being every 3 years, you have your on-site visit. But it's ongoing. You're always in some phase.
Always. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
But this is the big,
Thank you so much.
year.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for that overview. That was really helpful.
Sure.
Noelle, let's see, jumped in right as we were really ramping up for this visit, jumped into the absolute eye of the storm of budget season. And I just, I can say on behalf of the whole administrative team, we're really grateful that Noelle was willing and able to join us, and just a real pleasure and an honor to get to spend this time with her serving in this role as opposed to her previous role. So thank you, Noelle, so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a challenge, but it's been a really great challenge. I really enjoyed it. So I'm very lucky to work with a lot of awesome people. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Noelle? Okay. Thank you.
I did just want to say thank you for sitting through nearly 2 hours of the budget to give us that helpful and succinct report on the process that you're going
through. I've been a parent in the district for a long time. It's the first budget meeting I've attended, so it's very interesting. I'm going to encourage more people to jump on.
Right on. Well, thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have the business administrator report.
Just one item, the contract that is in your packet with our website hosting company, Finalsite. The reason this is coming before you is because any contract longer than 3 years requires school committee approval. Finalsite is the company that has hosted our websites for a number of years. We just recently, in the last 18 months, switched over to their latest platform. We're continuing to figure out better ways to utilize that platform. It's something that we can definitely grow on top of. And the district and school building level administration are pretty happy with trying to keep going in this way. So this is before you for a vote to approve the contract as presented.
I'll move to approve the contract as presented.
Carrie moves. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Julia seconds. Any discussion on that motion?
I just had a procedural question. Joe, are you authorized to sign on behalf of the district, so you can just sign the contract?
Jake and I are both authorized, and this is one where we're only able to sign after you have approved it. But yes, we would be either of us could provide a signature after the vote.
Great. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the superintendent report, I will turn it back over to Jake.
Thank you, Christina. I'm going to mush A and B together, and I think I can get through this pretty quickly. And we're going to really, really focus. First item on the elementary schools, and then the rest Mount Greylock Regional School. We notified our parents that will be participating in, or parents of children, guardians of children that will be participating in summer school, that because the Lanesboro Elementary School parking lot is going to be deconstructed completely starting on June 17th. And we're not sure when it will be reconstructed. We're not really going to have safe daily access in and out of Lanesboro Elementary School. So thanks to Noel and thanks to Chris Hawking, who is our summer school coordinator and a pre-K teacher at Lanesboro, the decision was just made that simply to have students in and out of summer school safely, we needed to combine our summer schools. And this year we'll be combining them at Williamstown Elementary. I see this as a real opportunity. It is a little bit of travel. We still will be providing bus transportation for students that are participating in our summer programs. And it is a little more travel for students who are from Lanesboro, but what a wonderful opportunity to consolidate some resources. And to me, and I think you'll agree with me, the best opportunity is simply to have our kids get to work together and get to know one another years ahead of when they will join forces over at Mount Greylock Regional School. So we sent this message out to families on Tuesday. And I've had really no negative feedback. I had one parent reach out via Parent Square and ask me if we were still providing transportation. And the answer to that was, of course, yes. And another parent just was like, hey, please get us the dates as soon as possible. And hopefully those will go out next week so they can plan the rest of their summer. But again, very grateful to Noel and to Kristen for organizing this and putting it together. And we're really excited about having all of our elementary students up at Williamstown Elementary this summer. That's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be good for kids. Moving on to just some school updates, and these are all thank yous and all expressions of gratitude. Really want to thank all of our winter athletes. It always is amazing to me how quickly we get to winter athletics and then how quickly those seasons are over and we're done and we're getting ready for everything to be back outside again. So thank you to our winter athletes. Everybody had really positive seasons, both the teams that we hosted and the teams that we co-opted with. And best of luck and good health and safe travel to our spring athletes. Just a lot of excitement, a lot of good momentum building into the spring athletic season and people taking notice of the progress on the track and the new playing field. I think early March, the construction folks were back on site and work started again. This winter was really a friend to us for that. And, you know, it's starting to actually look like you can visualize a track there and seeing our students sort of do this season and get through with this, what is now an inconvenience to maneuvering the campus, will soon just be, you know, one more gem in this crown of a campus. So we're really excited and grateful to parents and coaches that support all of our student athletes. Would like to give a well done and a thank you to the massive cast and an amazing crew of this year's musical Kiss Me Kate. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to go see it. I saw it. I got there a little bit late, but after our special meeting 2 weeks ago, got to go over and watch it. And was, as I always am, watching musicals put on by talented, incredibly hardworking people. It was just remarkable. I was blown away. How this, not like knowing all of the students and knowing how seriously they take their academics, and then seeing them learning dances, learning songs, learning pages and pages and pages of dialogue, learning blocking, setting up the theater so it all works and it all has the impact that the musical deserves. It was really special to watch a Sondheim musical or actually it's a Cole Porter musical, to watch a Cole Porter musical here in Williamstown, where Cole Porter had some history. And this was, of course, as was made notice of in the Berkshires, and we're very grateful for that. This was Jeff Welch's 25th musical at the Mount Greylock Regional School. I would suggest to Jeff that another 25, and he could probably hang up his tap shoes and consider that he's left his mark. But really thinking about the amount of work that goes into creating that musical, thinking about the Friends of the Arts and the work that the parents and the guardians of these young people do, and thinking that Jeff, over 25 years, probably averaging about 2.5 cents an hour, given what the stipend is for a musical and how much work the musical is. Just really, really incredible, involved, intricate work. And it was just magic. And I am just so grateful and proud of everybody involved. And while we're on that theme, thank you to our music teacher and band and choral and orchestra teachers, Jackie Vanette and Patrick O'Connell, and to the young musicians that they work with and inspire for another wonderful Prism concert. Very sadly, I was sick on Tuesday for the whole day and missed the daytime version and the nighttime version. I did have a friend who was sending me sneaky videos during the nighttime version, so he kind of saved me. But the Prism concert happens in the gym. All of the bands, middle and high school, are set up. The choruses are set up. The orchestra is set up in different portions of the gym. During the day, we welcomed third, fifth, and sixth graders from our elementary schools, including Hancock, to come up and be inspired and get a little taste of what they're in for, some of the magic they're in for when they get up here to Mount Greylock. And just, people were just beaming about the concert the day after. Just really remarkable. And again, really involved work. And this one involves the custodial crew setting up chairs and getting things set. It involves the health and wellness teachers giving up their teaching space for several days to get it ready. And just could not be more proud of our students and the grown-ups that helped them along. And also congratulations to our numerous junior districts performers for band and chorus and orchestra. I believe they had a rehearsal at Minnechaug last Saturday, and I believe they have another rehearsal and then a performance with students from across Western Mass at Minnechaug this Saturday. And I know that Jose, I suspect you may be making the trip down there, looking at the team photo of that crew. And really, really exciting. And again, it's a real testament to what happens when teachers and students and families form a cohesive unit and work as a team and work as a family to do remarkable things for kids. For a school our size, to have, I think we have like 16 or 17 representatives at this festival just for middle schoolers. That's really impressive given that we have a 2-grade middle school, and we don't have a standalone middle school with 700 or 800 students. We have a 2-grade middle school combined with a high school in many ways that's comprised of 200 students, and just a real testament to all involved. We're really excited tomorrow during the half day. Juniors and seniors have the reality fair over in the gymnasium. The reality fair, if you're not familiar, is sort of a couple of hours. It starts out with a workshop in the auditorium tomorrow morning, just sort of around the realities of life once you get out from having grown-ups around you who are going to pay for everything. I was grateful I volunteered to help out. I was grateful. I get to talk about short-term and long-term savings. So everything from building an emergency fund to getting ready for retirement. And I suspect there's some students who probably know more than I do about both of those, given what I've seen in our personal finance classes. But that should be a really fun time, and looking forward to that time with our 11th and 12th graders. And then tomorrow is actually today and tomorrow where Simran Singh's wrapping up his time with us. He spent a lot of time with our 7th graders today, and he's spending the day with us tomorrow, some with students, some with staff. And we're grateful to Simran and the time that he has been able to spend with us, and the work that he's been able to do, particularly with our students who really value and appreciate his presence. So that is, I'm sorry if I rushed through that. I know the hour is getting late and this meeting has been lengthy, and we still have a little bit more business to conduct, but that is all of the thanks that I have to give for now. So thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Any questions for Jake? Okay, I would like to make a motion to enter into executive session with intent to return to open session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual. Sick leave bank.
Second.
Curtis seconds. All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Green eye.
Elfenbein eye.
Ursula, are you still there?
I'm here. Did Carrie leave? Sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
well, sorry, I didn't realize that. Malloy, aye.
Miller, aye.
Okay, thank you. It is 8:15. Joe, will you set up a breakout room? Thank you.
I almost accidentally left the entire meeting.
Accident, sure. All right, let's just make sure we have everyone back. See, Carrie, we lose Steve.
We lost Steve, but I wonder if that's when he said he only had 8 minutes. Was that?
That was, and that when he specified at the end of the conversation,
Okay.
it was his way of, yeah.
So it is 8:29 p.m. We are back in open session. It looks like we have lost our member, Steve Miller, for the remainder of the meeting. I would like to make a motion to approve the sick bank requested as submitted.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Connery, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green eye.
Malloy, aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. Next up on the agenda, upcoming meetings, Mount Greylock Regional School District FY25 budget meetings in district towns. The Williamstown Finance Committee meets March 20th at 7 p.m. And this has a note, as a posting may change to 6 p.m. Do we know if that's changed?
As of right now, we have not heard of it changing, but I don't know if we'll know for another few days.
Okay, so public can keep an eye on the town calendar. I would imagine that will get updated. The Lanesboro Select Board and Finance Committee joint meeting is March 25th at 6 p.m. Our next regular school committee meeting is April 11th at 6 p.m. Julia.
I know in the past that some of us have gone to those meetings to help represent the school committee. I'm not on the finance committee. I don't feel the need to show up, but I'm just wondering if it is helpful for those of us to show up in at least in our own town's finance committee meeting for any reason.
So historically, I always tried to make the meetings as the chair. I know Carrie, as the chair of the finance committee, also tries to go. I think it says a lot to the towns based on the discussion that we had on the budget. If you can show up at your town-sided meeting, it's very helpful.
I will be at the Lanesboro meeting.
I'll come to Williamstown.
Great.
Carrie will do the talking. Right?
So I'm just seeing that I now have a conflict with the 11th. So I'm wondering, so I just set up a legislative forum for April 11th, not realizing it was a school committee night, but also because that was the one date that our legislators could make. And it's for the entire division. So it's all of Berkshire County, including yourselves, to talk about whatever issues you feel are important to talk about with your legislators. So should I try to change that, or should I just be absent? I would hate to have you guys miss it because of school. I'm not sure what to do.
Sherry, here's maybe the root of that happening was that I let you know probably 3 months ago that I was not going to be available on April 11th. So we were going to find an alternate time, which we never did. But I think that legislative meeting, particularly given the times and the issues, is I have some notion of how much work it was for Carrie to set this up, to pin those folks down to a solitary date. I would encourage every one of our members to be at that meeting, and tomorrow we can find an alternate date for the April school committee meeting.
So the other possibility is that meeting starts at 5:30. So if we can move the school committee meeting to 7 rather than 6, we could do both.
So I have also just realized I am not available for anything on that evening. I managed to double book, or actually triple book myself. So I will not be available for either the regular school committee meeting, or which is terrible timing. And I also have to figure out how to cancel the other thing.
Ugh. Jake, you're still not going to be there on the 11th?
I don't think I can be there on the 11th.
Can we change the date?
We can. I will say April is a really rough month for me. If we push it to the next week, I'm definitely not going to be there because that's my birthday. So
would it be possible to move it off of the Thursday for in April and meet on a different day of the week for just our committee meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we could see if I don't know, what did we do before? Survey monkeys, maybe something, pollster, whatever,
Doodle
to try to
poll.
figure out a date.
Yeah, that.
Doodle poll.
Doodle poll, yeah, whatever.
I would
Jake, are
love
you away all week that week? Jake McCann?
No, just that Thursday evening is we're going to see Colin Hay in Northampton, the
Yeah,
lead
so
singer from Men at Work. So we're
Nice.
so Tuesday the 9th?
Yes. I was going to suggest that too.
Tuesday, April 9th?
Oof. I can unhappily do Tuesday the 9th. Is Tuesday the 22nd too far back?
Yeah, that's really pushing it, I think.
And that's not a Tuesday.
It's a Monday.
23rd, sorry.
How about the 16th? Tuesday the 16th.
That's break.
That's
I mean, I'll be gone for school
That's the
break.
week of break.
All right, doodle poll it is.
Right on. But
tried.
I can just make it, suck it up and miss a thing I want to do and go to the 8th, be a big, or 9th, whatever that is.
Okay, can everyone do the 9th? Thumbs up. 9th.
Oh, we have Steve.
Jose.
Steve's back.
Steve's back.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Jose is
Just having some
good.
audio troubles.
Can you do the 9th, Steve? Thumbs up.
I think so. I'll adjust my schedule to try to make it work.
Okay, so the next not regularly scheduled school committee meeting will be April 9th at 6 p.m.
Any chance we move it up at all time-wise on that day? I hate to throw that.
5:30?
Yeah.
5?
I can't logistically do 5.
5:30?
And drive legally. 5:30? Could do 5:30.
That would be great.
Right. And then, okay. So the legislative session, Carrie, was that what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah.
That I messed up?
Zoom. Yeah, on the 11th.
Okay, that's on Zoom and it's at
5:30.
5:30?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'll send out details to the whole division, but I wanted to get it on your calendars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I do not have any other items for discussion. Any agenda requests?
Yes, Christina?
Yes.
I'm re-requesting the response to Stephen Dravis that I sent you about. I can email that to you again if you want.
Sure.
Christina, did you respond to Stephen Dravis? Because you respond to most of, or all of the emails that we get as a committee. It went to the whole committee.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I say resend it and then you can look at it and then you'll know.
Yes.
Well, part of it was he noticed that we had not posted some things on time. And so I think it would be worthwhile to just talk a little bit about to make sure that things get posted with plenty of time for the public.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do have a process in place, but our process is only, I mean, it's a human process. So sometimes there is break points So I don't.
Right, but I mean, one suggestion is a lot of. I was just saying, one suggestion is a lot of the agenda is known in advance, and so we can post a draft agenda and put in some documents much earlier than the 48 hours.
And then just amend it as needed.
And then just amend it as needed. You know, if we know we're going to be talking about certain things, we can let the public know with plenty of leeway.
So that seems like a thing we can discuss.
I thought it was the packet materials that were in question, not just the agenda, but I'd have to go back and look at the email.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll take a look and we can figure out if it belongs on full committee agenda or policy subcommittee agenda. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Curtis,
moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Curtis seconds. All in favor?
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Malloy, aye.
Steve, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sort of.
Barely.
Just press the middle button.
Just need a motion to just
need an aye.
Just need an aye.
You don't really.
Yeah.
As long as it's seconded, we're good. And yes,
And
Dave, I am still in a sling.
8:41 p.m. We have adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, guys.